Hey everybody, Sean Yesner here. So I wanted to do this quick video from outside on my back pad. It's a beautiful morning here in Tampa, Florida, and the weather is perfect. And I thought I'd do this short video for you. Now, typically I try to keep things evergreen, meaning the date really doesn't matter. But I'm recording this on the morning of October 1st, 2020, and the significance of this date, at least right now, is that as of 12:01 this morning, as of midnight this morning, Governor DeSantis here in Florida allowed the eviction and foreclosure moratorium to expire here in Florida. And so what does that mean? Does that mean there's going to be a wave of evictions and a wave of foreclosures? Well, I don't know. Let's take a look at some of the facts. So in the last extension, or maybe even the extension before that. I don't remember. There have been so many. But in one of the last two extensions, Governor DeSantis mentioned the word final action in his executive order. In other words, what he said was evictions and foreclosures in Florida could go all the way up to final action, but you couldn't take that final action. So in my mind, what that means is the eviction could be filed and go all the way to the judgment. But then when the writ of possession, which is what the sheriff uses to evict somebody, the writ of possession would not issue until the eviction moratorium ended. So the lawsuit could proceed all the way to the end, but there could be no final action, final eviction. Similarly, with a foreclosure, it could go all the way to final action. So there could be a final judgment, but no foreclosure sale. So up until now in Florida, when the moratorium was first put in place by Governor DeSantis, there was a question as to whether the eviction or the foreclosure lawsuit could even proceed. Some counties stopped those proceedings dead in their tracks. Others let them proceed up until the final judgment was entered. No writ of possession could be issued. No foreclosure sale could be scheduled. And then recently, in a couple of extensions ago, Governor DeSantis clarified that to say that that was the status of the executive order. No writs of possession could issue by the sheriff, and no foreclosure sales could continue. But you could go all the way up to that point. You could go all the way to final action. Now, that's Florida. Recently, the CDC came out with guidelines that said in order to protect the public health, in order to prevent people from becoming homeless, in order to prevent people from starting to live together and potentially spread the disease, spread COVID, the CDC came in under its governing authority, which is being challenged by certain states right now, but the CDC came in under its authority and said, listen, we're not going to allow evictions that are COVID related. And so one of the pieces of logic in why Governor DeSantis ended the Florida moratorium is he said, well, the CDC is protecting people from being evicted. So the CDC and Florida don't need to double up on this concept of preventing people from being evicted. The state of Florida can back down on its prohibitions because the CDC is preventing people from being evicted in COVID-related cases. And the tenants in those eviction cases do have to certify, there's a form on the CDC website where they have to certify that their default is due to COVID. Now, if the landlord can prove that the eviction is not due to COVID, the lease has expired, the tenant has committed a crime in the property, some other violation of the lease agreement. In a situation like that, the CDC moratorium and the Florida moratorium, when it was in effect, would not apply, and the eviction theoretically would be allowed to proceed on those grounds. So one of the reasons that Governor DeSantis stopped the eviction and foreclosure moratorium is because the CDC protects people who may be evicted based on a payment default under COVID. And so that was one of the pieces of logic. Now you may be asking, well, what about on the foreclosure end? The CDC doesn't cover foreclosures, didn't announce that it was doing anything with regard to foreclosures. And you would be absolutely right. Now, the CARES Act and the federal government have said in relation to foreclosures that if it is a federally backed loan, meaning Fannie, Freddie, HUD, VA, FHA, if it's a federally backed loan, then there can be no foreclosure if the default is based on COVID. Again, a COVID-related default. And so again, Governor DeSantis, I said, presumably to himself, or maybe his advisor said to him, or who knows, but Governor DeSantis said, well, if it's a federally backed mortgage, there cannot be a foreclosure. And so Florida's executive order freezing final action on foreclosures is duplicative, because if it's a federally backed mortgage and the default's due to COVID, there can be no foreclosure. And so I think that's why our moratorium ended. Frankly, it surprised me. Frankly, I thought Governor DeSantis was going to keep the moratorium in place at least maybe through the presidential election. Maybe he was going to keep it in place through January 1, which is when CARES Act expires December 31. The CDC Guidelines expire December 31 of this year unless they're extended. So maybe he was going to keep it until December 31, I thought. Maybe DeSantis, I thought, could keep the eviction and foreclosure moratorium in place until there is a vaccine or a cure for COVID or something along those lines. But I guess instead what he's put out in the media is that he believes that the federal government, through the CDC, through the CARES Act, through federally guaranteed, federally insured mortgages, has done a good job of preventing or freezing or stopping evictions and foreclosures everywhere. So there was no reason for Florida to double up on those guidelines. Frankly, though, it did surprise me. I thought he would have ended it months ago, and instead he kept extending it. And so I was anticipating the moratorium to continue to be extended, and Governor DeSantis ended it. So is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? I'll leave that up to you. There is the argument that while this is protecting tenants and this is protecting people in foreclosure, landlords are getting destroyed because tenants are not paying rent. And so landlords have no way to pay their mortgages. Now, those landlords would then be protected by some of the other foreclosure moratoriums put in place. But still, at some point, all of this is going to have to be caught up. The Florida executive orders, the CDC guidelines, the CARES Act guidelines, all of them say that this moratorium does not excuse the responsibility to make payments. So at some point, all these payments will or would have or are or will become due. Now, what I think in terms of mortgages, I am here in Tampa Bay, was here for Hurricane Irma, and after Hurricane Irma, all the banks in Florida, most of the banks in Florida, came in and put a streamlined modification into place. And that streamlined modification allowed me to get a modification on this house that you see here behind me. It was very easy. There was very little documentation that I had to provide. I was in an area hit by Irma, so did a loan modification, added a little bit of principal to the loan, but I pay a little bit more extra every month anyway, so really didn't hurt me very much, just gave me the ability to take a few months off in mortgage payments, catch up on some other bills, and then modify my loan. Now, I have a feeling that the federal government is going to do that mortgage companies are going to do that for people impacted by COVID, for people that couldn't make their mortgage payments due to COVID. I think we're going to again see some of these streamlined modifications, no document modifications, just a COVID certification, maybe some simple financial information, and then you get a modification for COVID. Now, that's not a promise. I haven't heard anything. That's just my personal opinion. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please give me a buzz. Again, I do want to promote my new book, Become Debt Free in Less Than 1 Hour, and you can pick that up at SeanMYesner.com/become debt free. So again, SeanMYesner.com/become debt free. If you have questions about how do I catch up my rent payments, how do I catch up my mortgage payments, how do I do a modification, how do I get out of debt, a lot of those topics are covered in that book, Become Debt Free. I'll help you increase your income. I'll help you decrease your expenses. The combination of those two things frees up more cash flow every month to allow you maybe to catch up on your rent, catch up on your mortgage. And so that's the intent here. I hope you enjoyed this video. As more stuff comes out, I will jump back on another video. I will certainly keep you all apprised of that. You can also find very topical content on my podcast, Crushing Debt Podcast. New episode came out today, all about student loans. So I highly encourage you to check that out. One way to get there is SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. So again, you want the new book for free. It is Become Debt Free. SeanMYesner.com/become debt free. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, SeanMYesner.com/subscribe. That'll do it for this video. I think I've plugged myself enough. If you have questions about evictions or foreclosures anywhere in the state of Florida, please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to answering those questions. I hope that at the end of the at the end of the month you have more money, and not at the end of the money you have more month. And I'll do another video here when I can. Thanks.